In today's episode of The Shack Investigates, we're going to delve into a chilling reality that demands our attention: the pervasive issue of child abuse and the tragic consequences that follow. Take, for instance, the harrowing Shanda Vonder Ark case, where a 15-year-old boy suffered unspeakable torment, ultimately succumbing to starvation and abuse at the hands of his own mother. Yet this tragedy is not an isolated incident. Countless of innocent children endure unimaginable suffering daily. As we are going to meticulously examine the disturbing details of the Shanda Vonder Ark case, we are confronted with the unsettling question of how and why such atrocities occur. This goes beyond an isolated incident, and it speaks to a broader societal problem. It's a call for our collective responsibility to spread awareness, demand the changes, and advocate for harsher punishments for those who inflict pain, neglect, and dehumanization upon these vulnerable children. This podcast aims not to only uncover the dark corners of the heart-wrenching stories, but to ignite a flame of urgency within our society. Only through awareness, empathy, and a united demand for change can we hope to protect the innocent and prevent further instances of child abuse. Join us tonight as we are going to navigate through the shadows to shed light on the imperative need for societal reform and justice for those who cannot speak for themselves. Welcome to The Shack Investigates. Viewer discretion is advised. This episode of The Shack Investigates delves into deeply distressing and sensitive subject matter surrounding child abuse. The details explored may be triggering for some listeners, and discretion is strongly advised. We understand the gravity of the content discussed and encourage listeners to prioritize their well-being. If you find the topic disturbing, or if you may be triggered by discussions of abuse, we recommend approaching this episode with caution. Our intent is to shed light on the issue while ensuring the safety and emotional well-being for our audience. If you or someone you know is struggling, please seek support from appropriate resources in your area. Welcome to the Shack Investigates. I'm your host, the Shack Lady, and today we're going to embark on an unsettling journey into the heart of a haunting case, the Shanda Vonder Ark incident. Specifically, we were going to dissect the incident report provided by the North Shore Police Department, unraveling the tragic events that befell Timothy Ferguson, a young 15-year-old boy subjected to the unthinkable horrors in his own home. As we're going to navigate through the intricacies of this case, it's essential to approach the details with a solemn acknowledgement of the profound tragedy and the real lives that have been affected. This incident report serves as our guide, shedding light on the sequence of events leading to Timothy's untimely demise, and is a stark reminder of the urgent need for awareness and action in the face of child abuse. Join us as we carefully examine the North Shore Police Department's report, piecing together the chilling narrative that surrounds Timothy Ferguson's ordeal. Our aim is not to only understand the specifics of this case, but to foster a collective commitment to preventing similar tragedies in the future. This is the Shack Investigates, and we are going to navigate through the darkness to bring truth to light. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate each and every one of you that have been able to show up this evening. We're going to go ahead and continue on our episode 3 in regards to the incident report that we already discussed prior. We left off on page 59. There is 80 pages of this particular incident report. And I had started the recording at one other time for a short, brief while, and I ended up deleting that whole recording. I figured it would be best because there were so many complications with technical issues that we'd go ahead and start it all over. And this way we could, have no interruptions of anything. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the incident report where we left off. And here we go. And obviously, as you guys recall, this is the case supplemental report from North Shore's Police Department. This is in regards to, Shanda Vonder Ark, Paul Ferguson, and the victim, of course, is unfortunately Timothy Ferguson. So we're going to go ahead and continue on 59. Information. I'm just going to continue reading on what we have. I spoke with Kendra Kim via text regarding information on blank, which is more likely Timothy Ferguson. Statement of Kendra Kim. Kendra told me she was a school psychologist in the elementary and middle school Timothy attended in Oklahoma. Kendra had advised in 2011, when Timothy was in the first grade, his brother Paul was placed in another elementary building. Kendra advised it was alluded that Paul may have been sexually abusing Timothy. Now, grant you, I'm adding Timothy's name in because of after analyzing each and every sentence that I have gone over several times, it is majority, most likely Timothy. It is blanked out for privacy, I believe, but I have concluded that it is not G, the younger half brother. Kendra advised Paul also did not attend the same middle school as Timothy. Kendra told Timothy and Paul did attend the same high school. Kendra described Timothy as a precious little guy and was sweet, caring, and hungry and amazing. Kendra advised Timothy would attend school in clothes that were several sizes too big and dirty. Kendra advised Timothy would urinate in his pants, even in middle school. Kendra advised she believes the bladder accidents were the result of alleged sexual abuse. Kendra told me Timothy was always hungry and would eat anything you put in front of him. Kendra advised she never knew Shanda. Kendra advised she believes Timothy only felt safe and secure when he was at school. And Kendra advised she did not personally contact DHS, but knew several teachers over the course of Timothy's education that had. Now, of course, the detective said, in the disposition, I advised Kendra to contact me if she had any further information. So let's go over this. So one, a lot of kids, when they are in different age groups and they have students that are attending the same school, they're going to be in separate buildings, and sometimes recess is put in different school yards, right? I remember when I was a child, I was older than my siblings, and I attended the same school up until 6th grade. And my two younger siblings had recess at different times. My one sibling might have the same recess as me, but my younger sibling, because of his age, he was in a different recess time, and he was also in a different building. And so I don't see that uncommon, but I am kind of baffled that, she pointed this out as if it was a deliberate separation. My concern is when you have a school psychologist that claims other teachers have made those phone calls to DHS, Department of Human Services or Family Services, whatever, that agency is named in Oklahoma. The thing that bothers me is you're going by the assumption of hearsay or what you think you know of because somebody else is telling you. I would think if I was the psychologist at a school and I saw a child exhibiting these types of behaviors, I would have a responsibility to make a phone call myself. If the problem has not been resolved, no future therapy, whatever, and you've got parents that are not really as cooperative as you think, you would think that it is your responsibility to make sure that it is well known to DHS that these problems are still occurring, instead of relying on other teachers making those phone calls. I think there's negligence on her part. Just saying. I think there's a lot of failures in a lot of areas. And I think it's not to bash a school down or a school psychologist down. It's to open up the awareness of where our faults are and to take accountability and responsibility of those faults and make a difference to improve those mistakes so they can be prevented in the future. That is the only reason why I point it out. Now, you have Timothy. He's known to be hungry. He's very sweet. He's caring, and he's an amazing child. The pictures that we see of this child, he looks like a vibrant, normal child to me. I mean, maybe it's because I can bypass anybody with disabilities. I don't see any disabilities in a child, even if they do have some disabilities or special needs. To me, they're human beings. And everybody's unique and special in their own way. And I'm sure a lot of you would agree in the same way that I would do. But this is the problem that I have. He would attend school in clothes that were several sizes too big and dirty. Okay, so Timothy comes from a large family. His sister made that comment in the trial on her impact statement. It was her and him that got the hand-me-downs, right? But could social services intervene? And also, could the school psychologist intervene with suggestive resources that could help a very large family? So then this child could get accommodated with clothes that would fit him, that were being age appropriate. So it also prevents, stigmas in school or bullying in school, insecurities, or the child just feeling like, gosh, I don't fit in for nothing, I think it would have helped. I know there's a lot of schools that do help impoverished families, whether it be on the holidays or throughout the whole year. They make sure these kids are fed twice a day with breakfast and lunch. If they're in activities after school, they definitely get activities, and they also get snacks and such before they go home. This is to prevent children from going hungry, because we don't know what their dynamics are in the school system. So I applaud the schools that do make that extra effort into making sure that these kids are stabilized during the school hours. Because if they have to miss one meal, which I don't think any child should, at least we know they're getting fed during school hours, right? So, but why doesn't this school system have a resource plan in place to accommodate? You know, we hear about the things that they talk about, but we don't hear of what they have done to help this kid. As we go further, I'm sure we're going to hear more. But my other concern was there was an accusation in 2001 that Kendra had advised, it was alluded that Paul may have been sexually abusing his brother, right? Well, if that was the case, why didn't the school, your psychologists, your school counselors, the principal, the school nurse, the school teachers, there's a network of resources, of responsibilities right there that could get together, just like children with an IEP plan. And I know he was on an IEP plan. This is where I feel that the school had failed him while he was on his IEP plan. Okay. They weren't looking for his emotional wellness. They weren't looking for his physical well-being as well. You can say you're concentrating on his academics, but there's other areas of responsibility on that IEP plan that I feel is detrimental to the child's success in school. And if you are suspecting, or it's been alleged that this has occurred, then I think it should have been stressed to DHS that something needs to be done to really investigate this, to make sure that if Paul is considered the perpetrator in this, the alleged perpetrator, he's not been charged with anything, so we have to say alleged by rumor. Why don't they do an investigation on this child and then do forensic investigation? You know, research it more to find out, was Paul being subjected to sexual abuse as well? Obviously, kids that participate in sexual abuse activities are usually known to be victims of sexual abuse or assault themselves. And they're just repeating the behavior. The cycle is getting repeated. So how do we fix this problem? We fix it by addressing who is being accused, look into that area at the root of the problem. Then you take the other victim, the alleged victim, which is his brother, and you dissect that one as well. So we can then have the root of the problems on both children, get to the nit and gritty, so we can then provide them the right resources, the right psychotherapy, trauma therapy, whatever is needed to be done to help rehabilitate these children from the traumas that they experience in their lives. It's that simple. But why wasn't it done? This is where I feel that there was a failure in the system. Our school systems, which we all know, the public school systems, you know, their hands are full, right? But I think a lot of them are pretty, like, they expect somebody else to take care of the problem. It's paper pushed, right? And I think just to make sure that the safety and the welfare of the child is really being taken serious, the more voices that make complaints or calls pertaining to a child's welfare could save that child's life. Because the teachers or the school staff, nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors when that child does go home. We only see the persona of the child when he comes to school. And there are so many children, so many victims that mask their pain. They hide their pain because school, like she said, is the safe place, right? That's a safe place. So, of course, this kid is going to feel like he's free from any pain, humiliation, any stressors that are going on in his personal life behind closed doors at home. At school, he could feel free. Now, how do we encourage children to speak up, to talk about this? Well, psychologists at school are educated to know better. They know how to do this, and they know how to get intervention services, such as social services, involved with this. So then you can get to the root of the problem and try to save this child's life. Excuse me. So this is where I feel it was a failure. Okay. And let's go to page 60. Now the officer says, I was contacted by text by Glenn Ferguson. Glenn advised he is the maternal grandparent of Timothy. Glenn and also Paul. Glenn advised he believes his son, Eric Ferguson, Timothy and Paul's father, may not have been honest with NSPD investigators regarding Timothy. That's interesting. You've got, it's actually a paternal grandparent. That's a typo because the mother is maternal, the father is paternal. So obviously the children's last names are Ferguson. And so Glenn Ferguson is the father of Eric Ferguson, who is the father of Timothy and Paul. So that would be the paternal grandparent. So that is a typo error, but we caught it, so we're not worried about it. But that's interesting how Glenn advises that he believes his own son, Eric Ferguson, may not have been honest with NSPD investigators regarding Timothy. That's tragic. That's tragic. I mean, you're not going to be accused of murder. You weren't there. You were in a different state, right? But why would you not be honest? What do you have to hide, Eric Ferguson? What do you have to hide? What did you do? What did you participate in? What did you neglect to do for your children? And why would other people feel that you may not have been honest with NSPD investigators regarding Timothy? Glenn stated that he resides in North Carolina. He stated he's the paternal grandfather of Timothy, Paul, Nolan, and Millie. Glenn stated that he and his wife would visit their grandchildren once a year in Oklahoma. Glenn stated Timothy and Paul were heavily medicated with ADHD medications by Shanda and Eric. Glenn stated at some point that Timothy was placed in a facility for unknown periods of time. But why? It would have probably been better to leave him at that facility, to be honest with you, because knowing that what we know now of the dynamics between the father and the mother, that kid was so far better off in a different facility. Glenn stated Shonda tried to keep the kids in their bedrooms by placing monitors in the hallway. Glenn stated he did not observe any forms of discipline. Glenn stated Nolan came to live with him when blank due to sexual misconduct between blank and blank. Now, trying to understand that one. Glenn stated Nolan came to live with him when he blank due to sexual misconduct between blank and blank. So I can't figure out the names of that right there. So Glenn stated all the kids were removed from the home in Oklahoma after Shonda and Eric divorced. Glenn stated Eric eventually obtained full custody of the children. Glenn stated Shonda only had supervised visitation rights to the children. He stated he heard Shonda had previously brought pornographic into the home and had shown it to the children. Glenn stated last time he had seen Timothy was in the summer of 2021. Timothy appeared to be healthy weight, and Glenn stated Eric sent Timothy to live with Shonda, even though Shonda was not supposed to have contact with him. So what is it that the paternal grandfather feels that his own son was not honest with NSPD investigators? That really, I would love to know what and why. I mean, is it because Eric Ferguson fears that maybe somebody is going to find something on him and get him for some type of charges? It sounds to me, from what I've seen and observed, that this is a person that is very paranoid of that fact, because he's more worried about himself and his freedom than he is for the welfare of his own children, and he never even showed up for an impact statement. That is disturbing. So let's continue on. Page 61. Okay, so now we have received a copy of the warrant for Shanda Vonder Ark for count 1, homicide, open murder, statutory short form felony, and count 2, child abuse, first degree felony. Vonder Ark was lodged on charges. 62. Officer, this is on 7/14 of 2022. Officer Brace and I requested by Detective Swanker and Detective Alm to respond to blank while they attempted to pick up Paul on his warrant. Upon arrival, Detective Swanker, Detective Alm, and Sergeant Kruhoff attempted to make contact at the front door while Officer Brace and I went to the rear of the residence. Contact was made with Paul at the front of the house. Detectives took Paul into custody, and he was brought to my patrol car to be transported to NSPD. Paul was searched prior to being placed in my vehicle by detectives. He was then seatbelted in the back. Sergeant Kruenoff had pound puppies respond to the dog located in the home. He stood by until their arrival. I brought Paul to NSPD without incident, and he was escorted to the interview room to be questioned by detectives. Paul made no statements while en route to the PD. Page 63. Detective, this location is at NSPD, MCJ. Detective Alm requested that I respond to NSPD to transfer Paul Ferguson to the MCJ after she completed interviewing him. I met with Paul and Detective Alm in the NSPD interview. I placed Paul into handcuffs while checking for tightness and double locking them. I searched Paul and placed him into the rear of my cruiser, and Paul was transported to the MCJ and lodged on his warrant without incident. A copy of Paul's warrant was provided to the MCJ intake officer. I cleared with nothing further. Page 64. Information. On July 14th of 2022, I stood before Magistrate Wirawara, I am so sorry if I'm butchering that name, and swore to the felony warrant for first-degree child abuse charges against Paul Ferguson. Detective Swanker and I, along with NSPD Road Patrol, arrived at blank and executed the arrest warrant. Paul Ferguson was arrested and transported to NSPD by Officer Davis and Officer Brace and was seated in the NSPD interview room. Detective Swanker removed Paul's handcuffs for comfort. Advised of Miranda rights. I advised Paul he was not free to leave and advised him of his Miranda rights. Paul advised he understood his rights and agreed to speak with us. Paul provided the following statements. Paul stated he knew he was in trouble when he was arrested. Paul stated he felt guilty for not stopping things from happening. Paul stated that he felt guilty not having a real conversation with Timothy. Paul stated while his mother, Shanda, was not home, Paul was in charge of keeping an eye on Timothy in case he misbehaved. Paul stated Timothy would misbehave by stealing food, but now thinks Timothy was actually hungry. Timothy would have to go to his room with food and his iPad until I apologize. G would have to go to his room with food and his iPad until Mama got home. Blank would have to go up on his bed, but this was before he was moved into the closet downstairs. So this means Timothy would have to go up on his bed, but this was before he was moved into the closet downstairs. Paul was not sure if Timothy was moved to the closet due to punishment or due to a broken bed frame. Paul stated Timothy slept in the closet downstairs on a tarp that was purchased off of Amazon. Paul stated Timothy was fed bread and bread with hot sauce. Paul also stated Timothy was also fed rice with hot sauce. Paul also stated that Timothy did not like the hot sauce. Paul stated the hot sauce was for punishment. Paul was not sure why Timothy was punished, but thought it was because he would sneak food. Paul stated Timothy would be punished for claiming the need to support for standing or leaning on stuff. Paul stated he noticed how thin Timothy was becoming and suggested they give him food. Paul stated at one point Timothy became unresponsive, but he was able to get him to respond. Paul said that he cooked Timothy some eggs with cheese and toast. Paul said he did not tell Shanda he made Timothy the eggs. Paul said he was told not to give Timothy food with asking. Paul stated there were no cameras upstairs or outside. And Paul stated Shanda did not restrict his food consumptions or G's, the younger child. Page 65. Paul stated he would tell Shanda if Timothy misbehaved to get him in trouble. Paul stated surveillance cameras were in the basement to monitor and watch Timothy. Paul stated that he and Shanda had access to watch the surveillance via apps on their cell phones. Timothy was homeschooled in Michigan. Paul stated he was unresponsive the day before he passed away. Paul stated he had to pick up Timothy up that day before he passed away. Paul stated Shanda told him Timothy was just acting. Paul stated that he put Timothy in an ice bath sometime after 4 p.m., despite questioning if it was the right thing to do. Paul stated he made sure the cold water was cold as it could get. Ice baths were a form of punishment. Paul stated he and blank did not receive the same punishments as Timothy. So Paul stated he and G did not receive the same punishments as Timothy. Paul never questioned Timothy's punishments, and Paul admitted to coming up with forms of punishments. Paul would punish Timothy without Shanda's instruction. And Paul would watch Timothy do wall sits for an extended period of time to ensure he did them right. And Paul would make Timothy run up and down stairs off the back patio for punishment at Shanda's request. Timothy would have to do 10 to 20 sets of stairs. If Timothy was caught on camera eating anything, he would be punished, and Paul would enforce the punishment. There were times Timothy was not allowed to sleep. Timothy did not get to eat like Paul and G, and Shanda would make Timothy throw up if he snuck food. Paul was told to make Timothy throw up, and Paul would tell Timothy to fake making himself throw up because Paul would not make him do it. Paul felt Timothy did not always need the food he sneaked. Paul stated he knows he should have stopped it. Paul stated he knows he is guilty. And Paul stated he deserves every punishment that comes his way. Paul stated that he would get angry at Timothy and at times did not want Timothy there. Paul stated he never wanted Timothy truly gone. And Paul stated he thinks it was a couple days before Timothy died where Timothy was still functionable and going up the stairs but still needed support, that Shanda said, "I'm so tempted just to leave him on the side of the road," Paul said. "Yeah, same here," Paul stated. Timothy was punished for acting like he needed support to move or stand. Paul would administer California Reaper and Scorpion Pepper hot sauce into Timothy's mouth for punishment. And Timothy would have to swallow the hot sauce. And Timothy did not like the hot sauce. The toilet was out of range of the camera. Paul would put a toothbrush in Timothy's mouth to assist him with self-induced vomiting. We go over this, and it just throws me to a loop. You have a young 19-year-old young man. He's still a kid in my eyes. Obviously, he's got some immaturity going on. His body language demonstrates some delayed, maybe could be autistic, could not be, or he's just socially, what is the word for it? Delayed, just delayed. And I see, from my opinion, he's got a conscience, okay? But there's some dynamics here that play a huge role into him participating in this type of behavior. And I really think it stems down to, there's a form of fear, maybe not an excessive amount of fear, but I think there is some form of fear in play. I feel that he's trying to fit in and to belong with his mother relationship, because we have to remember, he has not lived with his mother for over 10 years or more, right? He's older than Timothy, and Timothy was not in his mother's care since the age of 3. So he's a couple years older than Timothy, or a few years older, I should say. And so we're looking about maybe 10, 11 years away from the relationship with their mother. And a lot of kids will yearn and long for a relationship with their mother. And kids are so blindsided, they can't see no wrong. Even if they are being subjected to abuse, they still love the perpetrator. They still love the suspect. They still love the abuser. As sad as it is, because they were born into this family, it's what they feel like they bonded with, right? But the bond is broken in some ways. So you've got a child that feels the need of want and acceptance, and he's going to do as he's told to do. Does he have a little minute fear behind his consciousness? I would suspect he does, because if he's aware that if he does these kind of behaviors that his brother is exhibiting, what he's claiming that his mother is telling him that he's exhibiting, this is the kind of punishment that he can get in return as well, right? So here you have 2 other children, different age groups, and they're watching, observing, and here they're being told by the mother that this child is being bad, it's not being cooperative, it's faking it, it's acting, it's a stunt. He's stealing, he's lying, he's doing this, he's doing that. So she's complaining, she's ranting and raving. These kids are thinking, oh gosh, I can't do that. I won't do that. I don't want to have this happen to me. Maybe that takes a play into this kind of dynamics with Paul participating in it. And then him feeling a sense of control as well does play a dynamic into it as well, because of the abuse that he endured at the hands of his own father. So these kids were getting abused not only just by Shanda Vonder Ark, but they were also getting subjected to neglect and abuse of some form or fashion by their own father, Eric Ferguson. Obviously, Paul has talked about this and described it in his interrogation video. So it's evident that there were some problems. He focused more so on his father than he did his mother. So he was treating his father as the villain, but his mother as the saint. His mother couldn't do any wrong in his eyes. Well, he's 18. After the age of 18, he's been forced to leave his father's residence. He had nowhere else to go. He's got no social skills that would be mature enough to handle living on his own, taking care of himself, and being able to fit in with society. He's got some issues. He's got some special needs that need to be addressed as well. I think that need that extra support, that extra balance, and having a support system with your family is a wonderful thing, because if you can get somebody to help you teach the things that you need to know to how to survive and be very independently thinking and independently survive on your own, the better off you are. But unfortunately, he wasn't getting that on either one. She had depended on Paul, especially using the chronic excuse of, oh, my husband had a stroke. And that's when everything, all these dynamics fell into place, right? Right after the stroke. So she blames it on PTSD. That's such a farce. Then you hear her talk about her husband, her late husband, ex-husband, late husband, uh, that ends up having not only just a stroke, but then he has a seizure. So it's like, what were you doing? Were you punishing Timothy because you were having such an anxiety panic attack because your sole income provider, your partner, was exhibiting medical issues and you just did not know how to cope with that? So you were taking your anger out on this kid because your whole little perfect little life that you had for 12 years was falling in front of you, right in front of your face, and you had to lash out on someone for all of this anger that you had built up inside of you. That's how I see it, is that this woman did not know how to handle her anger. She taught her oldest son as well the same kind of techniques that she manages to deal with her anger. You've heard Paul express many occasions how he's had to walk away. He's told to walk away. He's got anger issues. Well, therapy helps with those anger issues, and the right teachings of a role model help with those issues as well. But you've got two parents here. They, by their actions, taught their 19-year-old kid, from the time that he was young to the time of his current age, we're pretty much teaching this kid how to become a murderer, with not understanding the severity of consequences, or even I can't even put the words right. I mean, he goes to work, he's doing his thing, but he's in so much of the control of them, whether it be the father, whether it be the mother, that this kid can't even think for himself. And then when he does think for himself, he's thinking in a way of, I've got a little bit of control here. I can feel like I'm an adult. I feel like I'm a big person. I'm doing the right thing. I'm giving my brother hot sauce. I'm doing this. But even when I feel like he's not getting enough, I'm going to go ahead and break the rules of Shanda and try to, defy her orders and give my brother some eggs. Right? It's like this kid is lost. This kid is definitely lost. And for Paul to state that Shonda did not restrict his food consumption, or geez, I can see him not getting like a massive amount of food restriction, but that kid, I hope his metabolism is checked out. I really do, because that kid is awfully skinny for 6'1". There's a lot of lengthy, tall people that are very thin, but this kid, you could see his bones. And that's not normal. I've never seen a 19-year-old go in a fetal position on an interrogation either. That right there was a telltale sign of some delayment of social skills in some form or fashion. And it's all as a result of the parents. Children only become what they become by learned behavior, and they witness things that they see and they react to them, and it stays with them, and they end up repeating what is taught to them by learned behavior. So it's like he never questioned the punishments. Of course, he's not going to question the authority of his mother, right? Now, he did admit that he punished Timothy without Shonda's instruction, because that gave him a sense of power, control. He felt like he was the big brother. He had to be the man of the house, right? The stepfather had a stroke and he's no longer living in the house. So, of course, he's got to fill that role of that kind of father figure kind of thing. You get some siblings that do believe that if there is a parent that is no longer in the home, whether it be by medical, death, divorce, or abandonment, that they have to feel they have to take the part of becoming the man of the house. And I think that that's what Paul was exhibiting, was he's now the man of the house, and he's got to do what his mom tells him to do, but he's got a role of responsibility too. It's kind of jacked up in a way of thinking, but it stems down to what he didn't get as a young child and where he's at today. He stated he deserves every punishment that comes his way. Now, I don't know if this is a typo error, and I don't think it is, but he believes that Timothy deserved every punishment. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm misreading this. Paul stated that he deserves every punishment that comes his way. So now we have a 19-year-old, 20-year-old now that says, throw it at me. Give me everything that you've got, because I am just guilty as can be, right? Now, there's something different about Paul compared to Shanda. Paul is actually taking accountability. Whether people like it or not, or disagree with how he's doing it, he's still taking a form of accountability. Now, grant you, he got caught, right? He got caught. He's being woken up to the reality of, dude, this ain't normal. Your mother did this and you followed along with it, and you did this to appease her, and you were the enforcer. You did this to your brother. It woke him up to a sense of reality. I don't think this kid understood the severity of what this woman was doing. I don't think he had that concept at that maturity level yet in his mind. He had it, but he didn't have it. You see where I'm going at this? And he's watching his mother make his brother throw up things, so he's making him throw up things because but he told Timothy to fake making himself throw up because Paul could not make him do it. And maybe there was a part of him that found it disgusting or, not right. I don't know. But to stick a toothbrush in his throat is, kind of insane. I mean, you can hurt somebody, by the gag reflexes. It's not a very healthy way of trying to make somebody vomit. But, he stated he thinks it was a couple days before Timothy died when he felt that Timothy was still functionable and going up the stairs, but still needed support. That Shanda said, I'm so tempted to just leave him on the side of the road. And Paul said, yeah, same here. That statement clearly tells you right there, he's going along with his mother. Maybe he's stressed. Maybe he's frustrated, tired of taking care of his younger siblings, right? But he wants to fit in. That's a follower type behavior. He's just agreeing with her because she's stating it. And because she's stating it, he believes it's okay. So it's okay for him to respond the same way. That's how much power she had over these kids. And he admired her. Don't get me wrong. I think he admired his mother. He's looking at her and she's very smart. She's going to school and she's got honors. And of course, he's like, oh, my mom's probably smarter than my dad. Look what she's achieved. It's a big deal, right? I think there's so many dynamics with Paul and his mother and his confusion. I think there's a lot of confusion with Paul and his differences of identifying between what is right and what is wrong, what is not acceptable and what is acceptable, because he's been conditioned to believe a certain way. And even though he knows between right and wrong to some degree, I don't think he knows how to implement enough control for himself to stand up for himself and to say something. This is where I do feel that Paul has a lot of insecurities and where the fear sets in. And a lot of people don't think that there might be fear. I really do feel that there is a sense of fear involved in this that goes so deep that if you've been subjected to child abuse, you know that feeling. You remind yourself of that feeling of, well, you could say this. How did you feel when you were getting abused? If you were abused as a child, did you have fear? Were there times where you felt that you had to go along with the situation because of fear? If you didn't, did you still have fear? See my point? We see these cases and we don't understand why some of these children don't speak up, or why women are domestic violence and they're subjected to abuse and they stay with their partner, right? We don't understand this, but fear is an important thing here. And self-esteem issues and insecurities, the power that other people have over another person is amazing. I mean, the manipulation just blows my mind away, how people could try to overpower people to the point where they can take control over them and make them so vulnerable and so weak that they fear crying for help. They want to, and sometimes they'll get to a point where they do, and that's how some of these people are saved. But it doesn't happen in all these cases. So let's continue on to page 67. Timothy was allowed only a sip of water. Paul stated that he never goes a day without food or beverage. Paul thinks Timothy was starved because he would take food. Paul admitted he would push Timothy. Paul admitted that when Timothy was getting very thin, Paul would still physically assault Timothy. Paul stated that he dropped Timothy the morning before Timothy was unresponsive, trying to move him from the closet. So I admire that he's at least admitting that. And I'll tell you something. There's something where people are very honest and they tell the truth and they don't realize, your normal criminal is not going to admit to this stuff, right? A narcissist isn't. And, but here you've got a young 19-year-old kid. He's being extremely honest at this point. I'm not saying he was honest before, but what I'm saying is he's being honest now, where now you obviously can tell that he's starting to get a little comfortable with the detective. And now he's being more forthcoming with the transparency of what his actions and what he partaked in, and that he actually would physically assault Timothy. He stated he dropped him in the morning before. Well, obviously, when you are moving a deceased individual, it's not a light thing to do. The body changes, it fills up with gases, and there's a lot of weight, and the body could slip at a grip. If you got a hold of the ankles or you got a hold of the shoulders, if the material, you've got baggy clothes on him, of course, or actually at that time when he was removing from the room, he didn't have any clothes on but a diaper. So, but could you try to move somebody and it slips out of your hand? Well, yeah, it's happened. And I'll tell you, I know it's happened because I have a picture of EMT paramedics dropping a deceased body, trying to carry a body onto a gurney. and it slipped. And of course, they were just, oh my Lord, you know what I mean? I know it freaked them out. And of course, they were trying to do everything they can to protect the family and cover the area. But I was lucky enough to grab a picture. And so then that way, you know, for my own personal reasons, for the family's protection, I did that. But, you know, it happens. But he obviously, you know, identified that he did do that and it was wrong. And he obviously must have been upset about it. Paul stated, I'm basically his murderer as well. And he's right. He is. Paul stated, I did not stop it and I could have. You're right. You could have. And now that you see it, now what can you do to prevent it from ever happening in your entire existence? Paul stated that he may be the cause of Timothy's starvation, but wasn't sure. No, he contributed into the acts of participating in it, but it was his mother that directed the show. Paul stated, if I did, just throw me in prison for the rest of my life. Paul stated, if I was part of it, I deserve it. Paul stated he used whatever ice was in the ice maker to add to Timothy's ice bath. Paul stated he could not have sat in the ice bath. Paul stated Timothy would have to sit in the ice bath naked. And Paul stated Timothy did not like the ice bath. Well, who wouldn't, right? I mean, hell, I don't like cold baths either, let alone ice. I mean, hell, nobody even likes to walk out in the damn snow barefoot. I couldn't fathom that. I mean, just recently, we hear a case of a mother on a police chase, 80 miles per hour, right? Takes off with, what, a 5-month-old baby, a very small young child, takes off into the woods for over 35 hours, and it's snow and ice, and oh my Lord, how could you do that? I don't get it. I mean, that's torturous. And, you know, another child, you know, dies because it was put in a onesies and it was left out to die in the cold, you know, within 11 hours. So it doesn't take long to hurt and harm somebody with extreme temperatures. And obviously, if this child is underweight, he's suffering malabsorption already. His organs are already going through the stages of failing. And the ice bath definitely did not help it. It exacerbated, I believed, his death. And it was tragic that he was so weak that he could barely do what he was doing. But this kid, you know, I'll tell you one thing. This young Timothy was a really strong human being. To endure what he did, I have to say, you know, that's a hero in its works right there. Because no matter what was being done to him, the older brother was right. He still loved the abusers. But he endured so much, and he fought in his own ways to do whatever he could to stay alive. So Paul stated, if I was a part of it, I deserve it. Yeah. Paul stated the day before Timothy died, Timothy was not functionable. Paul stated that he had to take Timothy's clothes off while he was lying on the floor. Now, Paul stated he had to pick Timothy up and place him in the ice bath. The first ice bath was 30 minutes long. Timothy was in an ice bath the day before he died from around 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. Paul stated Shanda dragged Timothy from the ice bath to the closet. Paul stated Shanda found Timothy deceased in the closet. Paul stated Shanda called out for Paul and told him Timothy was not breathing. Paul stated Shanda pulled Timothy out of the closet, and Paul demonstrated how he did a 30 chest compressions. Paul said he administered rescue breaths. Paul stated he could smell vomit on Timothy's breath. Paul is not sure if Shanda administered chest compressions. Paul stated he accepts responsibility for what happened to Timothy. Paul admitted that he was willing to participate in implementing punishment to Timothy, and he admitted to feeling powerful over implementing punishment to Timothy. And Paul stated he hates himself. I asked Paul what he thought an appropriate punishment would be for him, and he stated he did not know. Paul stated Timothy would tell him he couldn't do certain punishments anymore because he needed support. Paul stated he could have done something, but he didn't. And Paul stated he was afraid she would yell at him. There you go. The fear. He was afraid she would yell at him. Now, people get yelled at all the time, right? We go to our jobs, and if we do something wrong, maybe somebody gets explosive and yells at somebody, right? I mean, I'm just using it as an example. But maybe there's a reason why he was afraid she would yell at him. Paul stated Adam would not have let the punishments happen to Timothy. And see, even Paul stated Adam would not have let the punishments happen to Timothy. And Paul stated power got to my head. It sure did. Paul stated he wanted to hear Shondra was proud of him. See, there you go again. He needed that recognition from his mother, the praise, the acceptance. He wanted to feel accepted by his mother because he did not feel accepted by his father. And he was told that she abandoned him, et cetera, and she wasn't a good person. And he really, truly wanted to believe something better. Paul asked if he was going to prison. I advised Paul that he would be going to jail, and there was a process within the courts. And Paul asked if there was any way to testify to make sure Mama is put in prison for this. Paul stated he doesn't care how long he has to go to jail as long as he doesn't hurt anyone else, as she doesn't hurt anyone else. Paul stated he thought he felt powerful but was powerless. Paul stated he was drunk with power. But there's a key word right here, you guys. He thought he felt powerful but was powerless. Remember that. Those two are very important right there with his mental psyche. Powerless, but powerful. Powerful and powerless. And drunk with power. Well, it gave him a little bit of adrenaline rush, right? He felt important. Paul stated Grammy probably wasn't allowed to come inside the house because it was dirty or to prevent her from seeing Timothy. And Paul stated when his brother Timothy was a minor, he sexually assaulted his sister, blank. There you go. Wait. Okay, let's go back. Paul stated when his brother, blank, was a minor, he sexually assaulted his sister. There's only one sister. Okay, so you have the psychologist. I mean, was it Paul or was it the older brother? Now, this is where it's confusing me. And this is the part where the blanks don't help because we're trying to fit in the blanks with the possibility of who it might be. And this one kind of threw me off too. So Paul stated when he was living in Oklahoma and in elementary school, he faked admitted to sexually assaulting a female student. Paul stated he was unaware of any sexual abuse involving Shanda. Paul stated he never sexually abused Timothy. And Paul stated blank had a kidney stone when they were younger. Paul stated Shanda asked Paul to delete the text conversations between the two of them, as well as any photographs of Timothy. Paul stated Shanda told him to delete his search history on Google, and Paul stated his search history was on Safari. Paul stated Shanda told Paul to lie about finding Timothy dead on his bed before the first responders arrived. And Paul stated he doesn't think it is true that Timothy did not have feeling on his tongue. Shanda told Paul to put pants and a belt on Timothy before first responders arrived. And Paul stated the pants and belt were Paul's, not Timothy's. Paul stated there were times she only had him wearing a diaper. And Paul stated Shanda did not want Timothy to have sheets or blankets. Stated that Timothy may have been wrapped in a shower curtain when he was found dead. Wow. So that explains the evidence of why they collected the shower curtain. Unfortunately. So Detective Alm and I reviewed all text messages between Shanda and Paul between the dates of January 2022 and July of 2022. PDF document was generated with bookmarks with text messages which are of interest. Additionally, a document titled Text Message Notes was created which identifies the significance of the bookmarks. Both documents were delivered to the prosecutor's office directly rather than LEAP. The documents are also attached to this report. So now we got to page 70. Now this is information. I spoke to Tracy Hull via text regarding Timothy. Tracy provided the following statements. Tracy was a school psychologist at Sunset Elementary in Oklahoma. Tracy worked with Timothy one-on-one. Tracy stated Timothy was always appeared to be over-medicated with ADHD medications. Also stated Timothy alluded to never wanting to be at home. Tracy stated that Timothy told her and the other kids were locked in their bedrooms. Tracy stated she had worked out of home therapy plan for Timothy, but his parents never moved forward with it. So why didn't she call DHS? Did she call DHS? If she didn't, why didn't she? You got kids that are claiming locked in their bedrooms. Now, see, kids are interesting. They're not going to tell you all details of what they're going to go through. They'll give you little hints, little things. And it's up to you to do your job and to read through those hints, because kids, some are very, very smart where they're so afraid, but they're trying to be very careful with how they turn somebody in. You know, if you've got somebody, I mean, obviously you don't want to sit there and ask too many questions. You want to be very careful with your questionings, and those take professionals to doing this, right? But if I had a child telling me he and the other kids were locked in their bedrooms, I would want to know why. What is the reasoning behind locking the children in their bedrooms? Okay. I would have then asked the kid, do you get to go outside and play? Do you have any friends? Do they come over and play? You know, I would be asking those kind of questions. And obviously, if you hear something or, you know, a kid's reacting a certain way, then I think it's very warranted to contact the DHS or family services out there in that state to say, hey, you know, come on, we've got some more clues here. There's something going on that's not adding up. And I really think an intense investigation needs to be warranted. So page 71, information. I spoke to Michelle Savati via text regarding information on Shanda Vonder Ark. The statement from Michelle Salvati, I hope I said that name right. Michelle worked with Shanda at the Nawago County Courthouse. Shanda always referred to Paul as the 20-year-old, and blank blank, Shanda stated that the 20-year-old was really stepping up to take care of the blank, probably the children. Shanda stated that she was giving the 20-year-old a lot of credit. Shanda always had an iPad up in her office to watch her kids while they were home. Michelle stated she never got a look at what Shanda was watching, but it looked like the child was bigger than Gabriel. Michelle stated that she had met Timothy and Paul once, or maybe she met G and Paul once. We don't know. Right now it's blank.
Michelle would hear Shonda communicating via iPad with the child. Shonda would speak into the iPad, "No, you can't. More food. You already have what's provided to you. And no, you can't leave your room." Shonda always knew when the kids were moving around the house by watching them from the iPad. Michelle heard Shonda tell the kids they couldn't be out of their rooms at the same time. That right there to me is a flag. Sorry. Oh, Lord. Michelle stated blank was the only child she referred to by name. That must have been G. Or Timothy. We don't know. Michelle's dog sat for Shonda at Michelle's house from 10/4/2021 to 10/7/2021 as Shonda was going out of town to a wedding. Shonda told Michelle everyone in the house was going to the wedding except the blank. Michelle stated Shonda would make comments like, "Does anyone want a blank?" Michelle assumed this was a question stemming from a parent of a typical teenager. If I had a coworker like that, I would take those comments very seriously. Those are just not your normal comments that you make, even as a single mother. To jokingly say that you want to pawn off or get rid of one of your kids, or does anybody want a kid or whatever. I can understand just getting frustrated. Teenagers can be teenagers and stuff, but no, you're demanding them to stay in their rooms. They can't leave the rooms one at different times. No, you can't have this. And you're watching them on an iPad. I have never met anybody in my entire existence that watches their kids on an iPad or has surveillance in their homes. Why didn't she, as a coworker working for the court system called DHS, another failure? There you go. She obviously heard things. If you see something, hear something, say something. And obviously, if you don't do these kind of things in your home, then you obviously know it's not that as normal as you think it is. I understand there's cultural differences, okay? We have different cultures in families, different dynamics, but obviously it's something worth looking into, and it's not being nosy. It's not depriving, a coworker of their privacy. You are just making sure that the welfare of these children are at an acceptable level, and that everything is okay, because sometimes single parents do get overwhelmed. So it takes a village to help. And by ignoring these things that you hear or you are visually witnessing to, it tells me that you're blindsided to it, or you're just afraid that you just don't want to cause any problems with the coworker. You don't want to get involved or whatever. That's like somebody seeing a car accident and then all of a sudden they just keep on going. They don't care to stop to make sure somebody's okay. We have people in our society that do that. They just don't want to get involved. Well, sometimes you need to. So information, page 72, I received a text from Trisha Heaven regarding Shanda Vonder Ark. Trisha Heaven stated she worked with Shonda at the Nawago County Courthouse. She stated she knew Shonda had surveillance cameras in her house to monitor the kids. There you go. Another coworker knew about this, and nobody said anything. She referred to blank, the middle child or the problem child, to Timothy. Shonda told Trisha the middle child was being punished one day by standing out in the cold. Now that right there, I would have put my foot down. Shonda told Trisha he was wearing a coat and was not out there for long. After Trisha questioned her about it, it was cold outside. As it was cold outside. Shonda told Trisha she was going to put locks on the kitchen cabinets because the middle child was eating things he was not supposed to. Shonda told Trisha on one occasion that the middle child kept her up all night by getting up and setting the alarm off notification on her phone. Shanda told Trisha his punishment for this would be to stand up all night with his nose up against the wall. Okay, that's when you call enforcement. That's when you call intervention. If I hear somebody say that to me, yep, looks like you can't handle the situation, so you need some help. Social services needs to be called. And shame on these coworkers for not doing that. I don't care. I don't have a bone to feel sorry for you. You should have taken things into your own hands and reported this to DHS. These are not normal things people do. Receive a copy of the warrant authorized by Prosecutor Matthew Roberts for Paul Brian Ferguson for child abuse felony. Ferguson was lodged on the charges. We already went through that. So, wow, what do you guys think about this? I mean, this is, and just imagine, this is just not the only child abuse case or homicide pertaining to a child. Did you know that the United States is the #1 leading in homicides for young children under the age of 5? Throughout the whole world, United States is the leading #1. That is tragic. And in our country, the richest country we so-called claim to be, but we have the poorest mindset, mental health care, in my opinion, because we can't seem to fix or solutionize these problems to save these children's lives. Is it in our food system? I questioned that today. I was thinking, what's making these people go whack? I mean, what is making them lose their darn mind where they're so angry, so hateful? They're like Karen like crazies, Is it in the food system? Is their DNA getting changed so much where it's modifying their behavior? It's changing their behavior where people can't cope with things anymore? Or is technology playing a significant role in this? I mean, this is something serious that needs to be considered or looked into. Are we so desensitized that people cannot manage their own anger or their own self-control? Do we have a society that has such the need of feeling self-entitlements that they feel that anybody or anything, child or an adult, is just disposable? It doesn't make sense. Something is going on. Is it in the water? Is it in the medicines that we take? Is it the fact that people are so medicated or not medicated enough? I mean, what is going on? Something is causing this. And I really do feel that this is an epidemic, you guys. I mean, every time you turn around and turn the news on, it is constant. It is somebody is doing something. Somebody is hurting somebody, and it has to stop. And I've seen a lot of cases where child abuse and homicide together, where they do get 3-term life sentences. I think one case I saw, there was a death penalty case. I don't think they've even died yet. I think they're probably still on the list. But the fact is we have a lot of states that are against the death penalty, and we have some that are for the death penalty. Okay. And I understand that it is it's a controversial topic. A lot of people are against it. Some are not. But some feel that it's a shortcut to resolving a problem. But tell me, how is the problem going to get resolved when they're in a life sentence? They can't leave outside the damn bars. So do you think that's punishment? I mean, seriously, if you haven't been in the prison system, you would not know that it is its own world. It's like its own little world behind bars. You get to meet and greet people. You get to do jobs. You get to exercise. You get to read. You get to eat. You get to sleep. You get to use the bathroom. I mean, you get the basic necessities of living. Eat, breathe, and shit, So there it is. Now, how does that person feel like it's being punished? Some people will learn how to accommodate or transition themselves to adapt to their surroundings and go on with their new life. So it's not a bad thing, right? They just have a different life now. When you have the death sentence, in my opinion, it ends the problem. It ends the abuse. The cycle ends right there. No more people will become victims of that person's actions. That's how death penalty ends that one right there. And sometimes, in my opinion, I just feel that in severe cases such as this, America needs to set a precedence of a severe example all the way around the boards of all the United States. All the court systems need to unify and have the same level of sentencings. Screw this damn discretion at some point. I'm sorry, there's too much discretion in the courts because the sentences are not matching the crimes. You got some people that just get probation. Oh my gosh, yeah. And then you get some people that serve 10 years, 20 years, then a life sentence. And they killed kids too. I don't get it. So we're being selective? Or is it because of our state court systems and how the laws are written in that court that allow these people to get a reduced sentence, right? I think the punishment should go to the exceeded amounts. When you take a life of a child and you are robbing them of their existence and you torture them to the point where they're not even treated as a human being, and you violate them to the extreme where you don't even see them as a human being, you need to be euthanized. I'm sorry. That's just my personal opinion about it. You need to be put out, because how are you going to be productive in our society? How are you benefiting our society by contributing your abuses to innocent, vulnerable individuals? How can you sit there and say that you're not an animal? There's something sick and definitely broken within your mind. And we get down to narcissists. Narcissism, people with narcissism. Have you noticed every single person that commits a crime such as this have severe levels of narcissism? And in this case, we have definitely seen beyond the textbook definition of narcissism, malignant, psychopathic narcissism. I mean, narcissism is what makes psychopaths, and narcissism is also what makes murderers and child abusers and rapists. That's what creates it. It's the start of it. So how do we start? By talking about narcissism and how the abuses could stop, and what we can do as a society by trying to help people figure out ways to avoid narcissistic abuse and get away from these toxic individuals that are self-righteous. I mean, it's something that we all need to take into consideration. So most of you might disagree with my opinion about how I feel that people do need the death penalty with child abuse and severe torturing cases. But you know what? They're not CIA. They're not the government. And these victims are not spies. And even still, as Americans, we are against waterboarding, torture, right? Of even criminals from overseas during wartime. What she did to this kid and what others do to their children is beyond a genocide. It is no different than what the victims of the Holocaust went through. They were starved to death, tortured, humiliated. This kid was humiliated at the age of 15 years old. He was a teenager wearing an adult diaper, locked in a closet, video recorded, time to go to the bathroom, given sips of water, then teased about it and taken it away. The mother would do this. That's humiliating this young man. What bravery he dispensed. I mean, seriously, the bravery of this child was amazing. And the judge was right. This kid won the fight. This mother did not want him to win. She kept saying, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. Very competitive, but narcissists are like that, right? Very competitive. But Timothy did win. He sacrificed his life, obviously, not by his choice, but he's in no more pain. He's in no more misery. And now the whole world sees her for what she is. And now the whole dynamics of their family has been exposed publicly too. So Eric Ferguson, beware, people are still looking at you as well, because you're just as culprit and responsible as Shanda Vonder Ark, in my opinion. You broke a court order and gave a woman that did not need custody of her children. And you still did it. Because why? Your wife had a hard time coping with it. Your wife at the time didn't know how to balance her life between you and the children and the problems or whatever. I don't know. Maybe she was feeling depressed. Maybe she needed a psychiatrist. Maybe she needed therapy. And obviously, ultimately, you guys ended up divorced. So obviously there was marital problems going on. Maybe you were working too much. You didn't spend time with your family too much. But you know what? Regardless, you guys were too proud, too prideful to ask for help. And you could have gotten it. There were so many resources out there. There are so many resources for special kids, for disabled children all over the place. If you knew how to network and talk to people and say, look, I need to get this and I need to get that. Is there a facility we can take them for after school care or this or that? There are programs for that. But the help that you were offered, you denied. And you didn't even give this kid a fair chance. You guys gave up because you were too busy living your life, consumed in your own life problems, that you forgot that you were responsible for the life of another. This is how our world gets. We get too busy thinking that we're living our lives, going on our daily business, but we're not really living. We're forgetting the true aspects of what the real importance of life is all about. I spoke with, talking to a friend of mine. Being in nature is the number one thing that is going to connect you to the reality of real life. You can breathe. You can be at peace. You can be at calm. We run around in a city, traffic, bills, this, that. There's so many stressors. Us humans, we allow this to be done to us. We allow our government to control us. We allow people to control us. And while we're being manipulated to thinking that we're succeeding or doing something good for ourselves or our family, but in reality, we're not going nowhere. We're just going in a circle. It's a chaos circle. But until you figure out how to really, truly live your life and take some time out and get away from all that kind of stuff, and remove yourself from that equation, this is why people go off grid, and they live off grid for a reason. To escape that kind of life so they can be happier with their living, so they can spend time with their family, enjoy the conversations, and really get to know their family members and do the things that make and bring them joy. This is what we lack in our society. So, information. Stephen Vonder Ark contacted me via text to inquire about obtaining house keys to blank. Stephen advised his son Adam is the signer of the lease and Stephen is the co-signer. Interesting. Stephen advised he wanted access to the residence so he could begin the process cleaning and removing some of Adam's and blank's property. I would advise Stephen the house keys were in Paul's property at the MCJ and would attempt to make arrangements to collect the keys. I asked Stephen if he would consent to detectives meeting him at the residence in order to utilize the Wi-Fi in the home to retrieve surveillance from the cameras. Stephen did not hesitate in agreeing to this process. Paul consented to allowing me to collect the house keys from his property at MCJ, and I signed the release of property at the MCJ and obtained the keys. Stephen agreed to meet detective at blank between 1330 and 1400 hours. So I'm going to stop here. Okay. And we will continue another episode and we will leave on page 74. And it's good that they have family that's going to remove the items. Obviously, somebody's going to have to do it, right? Or it just gets thrown out by the landlord and disposed of. This whole thing is tragic, very tragic. But I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are in regards to this. You know, how do you see Paul as a victim and also as an abuser? And when he does have his sentencing hearing, which is coming up in February 26th, I believe. I think it's been moved up now. And I respect that the judge really wanted to do a lot. I'm not saying he wanted to do a lot. I think he's giving the opportunity for his attorneys to present to the court as much psychological evaluations as possible, or any diagnoses that can explain his psyche, his personality, any deficiencies that he's got, any abuses that he may have endured. I think that's going to play significantly into the decision making. Will he serve some time? I really do believe he will. Do I recommend prison, general population? Absolutely not. Oh my Lord. As impressionable as this kid is, general population would be the worst thing for this kid. And it's worse for a lot of the other kids that are sentenced into, prison at a young age, and then they're put into general population after the age of 18. I think it's very dangerous to do that. Because if you've talked to anybody in the prison system, especially male prisons, and they're harder than women's, trust me, there's deaths and stabbings every damn day in every single prisons. They're always on lockdowns. They will tell you, if you were not a hardened criminal, a first-time offender going in, you're just a first-time offender, you made a mistake, poor choice, poor decision, got hooked up with the wrong people, et cetera, whatever the circumstances may be. You go into prison, you're going to learn how to be a more harder criminal when you come out. And this is why it becomes complex. Does it really do any justice? Does it really help the person? And our systems are already failures in its own demise because every prison system, a lot of them are privately, right, owned. But if they were to have more government control and we were to have more mental health structures, more intense therapy programs, I think it could be more successful. That's why I've always said I really like how Norway's prison system is set up. Not to give, a slap on the hand to somebody who commits homicide. But the fact is we put people in prison to teach them a lesson and to hope that we're going to rehabilitate these individuals. We don't want them to recidivate and become offenders again. But unfortunately, our system in the U.S. happens to be designed like that. This is why people reoffend, because the mental health system and the prison systems suck. They fail. And no matter how hard there are individuals that really try to help these individuals, they can only do so much. Their hands are tied. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, you guys. We will go ahead. I will do another stream, and it will be, again, probably tomorrow. We'll do the episode 4 on the continuation of this incident report. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you guys so much for showing up. Think about it. Think about it. Put yourself in this situation. What would you do? And if you were Paul, do you think rehabilitation could help him? And do you also think that maybe his sentence in a medical facility should be a better option for him so he can get the intensive therapies that he needs to somehow, in hopes, rehabilitate this individual from the psychological abuses that he's already endured from both parents and God knows who else? So it's up to you guys. You guys think about it. Let me know. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. But in the meantime, you guys have a wonderful evening. And thank you so much for everything. You guys are wonderful. Take care.
Have you ever been the face, been the object of someone's hate? Like you stood all alone. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever been betrayed, labeled words you just can't say? Suffered silently, wanting to be erased. There's a reason to believe again when faith